Thank you. You're going to work in this session. I gave you homework right up front because I want you to have something you take away from this. This is going to be informative, it's going to be intuitive, and it's also going to be experiential. I want information back from you, I want feedback, I'm open to dialogue, I'm open to, you got a question I'm not clear on, ask it. It's that simple. Think of a community. How does a community communicate? Well, if you take a look at a organization that's around a tribal, let's say, organization, there's a different type of communication expectation amongst its members. Now, take that, what we're used to, what we get raised in a community of communication, and then go to work. Is it the same? Why is it different? How many folks have lived in cubicle world? Yes, I mean, you're within 5 feet of like 8 people, but there's none of this. You got your little walls up and you're doing your thing, and the communication is different. And why is that? I say it's because the organization is not leading the communication. The fallacy is knowledge is power. Knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential to act. People put knowledge to action. Power is not inherent in the knowledge unless someone transfers it, translates it into action. So this is the normal laydown of an organization. Everybody's seen an organizational chart. In the Army we call it a line and block chart because we have our own names for everything. So this line and block chart is a little different because this organization has identified that they have a knowledge management function. There is an operational capacity for folks to work in the knowledge management that leads the rest of the organization. Now you see they're tied right to the HR folks. I'm showing an example of what right looks like. Next slide. So in an analysis of that organization, we do a social network analysis. How do the people communicate? I mean, it's really that simple. Now, if the main stream of communication is email, we have software that pulls and be able to tell who's talking to who and who's not talking to who, more importantly, because you're identifying the gaps. You're identifying where the weak spots are. And you're also identifying who the powerhouse is of what everybody goes to for knowledge. So this just breaks down and goes against what we just previously saw because people look at the hierarchy of an organization and think that's how they communicate. It doesn't work well. So you want to create a flat network, a flat organization where it's transparent beyond departments, beyond people, functions, and the information or the knowledge is the asset. So what I propose is get away from the line and block chart of reality. That's great for pay and who's in charge and who's in trouble when somebody else does something, and who's liable. But in the knowledge work, think of it this way. Now that operation of the food delivery, I broke them down into 4 major components, or what we call in the military lines of operation. What are the main components of the organization around the work? Period. So in an organization, we take a look at what the work is being done. We prescribe what's called a taxonomy and figure out the words that make sense for the operation. So think of it just like that. It's a hub. It's that simple. It's a wagon wheel. But it's not around a center pin of an individual. It's around a knowledge base. Because what we're trying to get to is the organization builds its intellectual capital. And what that is a capital stream in the organization that they've identified that knowledge is an asset. Knowledge is an active asset. And when every person walks in the door or walks out the door, be it attrition, retirement, fired, quit, hit by a bus, where'd that knowledge go? It's not in the organization. It may be in a pile of emails somewhere on somebody's computer or in a shared drive stuffed in a box somewhere. Somebody's got to go through that and decipher the goodness out of that. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. So what I propose is build the knowledge hub first, and then your HR and your components and your everything around that organization execute around the knowledge, because the organization has a value of the asset of knowledge. So just to work it through, this is similar to a word map. You're basically building a semantic relationship so everybody can agree on. So you bring the key holders of the work and you say, all right, does this all make sense to everybody? And you get everybody's feedback and, more importantly, buy-in. Getting their buy-in to this is key. Because the face-to-face brings up two things. It builds trust. Once you start communicating with someone, you start building a common link. That adds to a lot of grease when it comes to operational action. Any questions on this slide?
So as you say that, I might have missed what you said right before it. What do you do to gather that knowledge over the 20 years?
So if we go back to what I prescribed, which is a knowledge hub, then organic to the organization, the knowledge becomes an asset. So why would you wait until the 20-year mark to try to capture it and just have it built into the system that the knowledge is always being resident in the organization and taken out of the person's head? So if you build the asset and have it, it won't be obtrusive. It should just be part of the natural day of work. The mentor-protege is basically just the apprenticeship fostered by the company or the organization. I mean, the way they used to train someone to build a sword, you lived and breathed and you understood all the nuances because you were trained one-on-one. That's the benefit of trying to get someone into a mentor-protege program, because you're going to, and they have reverse mentor-proteges. Don't assume that it's age-related, because it's not. You got some techie that's 22 years old that comes in and say, hey, we do this on social media, you guys should be doing this, and everybody's like, what the heck are you talking about? You can do a reverse. It has nothing to do with age. It's just skill sets.
How do you deal with people that like to keep things close to their vest?
Well, that goes back to that HR thing. If you hire people and you do not explicitly express that the organization has a knowledge expectation of them to share right up front, then you got the cart before the horse. It's a win-win.
So it all starts from the interview.
It's got to start at the front. You can't fix it from the back. Absolutely. Getting back to the HR thing, how do you build that behavior in an organization? You got, and my recommendation would be to build a stewardship program. Stewardship is this definition: the careful and responsible management of something entrusted. So if the organization builds that philosophy right up front and ties it to all the roles, function, tasks, duties, all the work, regardless of what the work is, it may not even be all information-based work. In the previous example, some of those folks were working as truck drivers and the maintenance folks on the truck delivery service. But they're all aware of what their role is in the intellectual capital of that organization.
And flattened organization.
Yes, flattened organization.
And I think, you know, this helps to keep people not from getting siloed in their...
It happens every organization I've been in, because they fall back to who's in charge. And if the knowledge isn't at the table, if your knowledge, organizational knowledge, is not at the table, then it'll never be recognized as important. It'll all fall back on who's in charge. This is from an organization I've worked with at George Washington University and Kent State University. They have put together the KMEF, the Knowledge Management Education Forum. This is an open wiki. You can go to it. You can get all this good information. It's a great resource. The idea is that there is no formal set of standards for institutions to be able to train and educate knowledge management. So this effort is try to build that. So in this diagram, we represent, just as we've been talking about, the folks at the rubber meets the road for where the work gets done. And in this red zone, they call it the knowledge organizational workers. Those folks that are just doing more work and not quite as much knowledge work as the folks say up here at the top, the chief knowledge officer of the organization. But it shows they all have an important role into the knowledge flow of that organization. This really shows operationally what role knowledge management has in the organization and who does it. On the left side, you have the strategic value. If your organization is not looking out 10 years where it's going to be, then this may not apply, but it should. You should have a good strategy of where you want to be, or organizationally where the organization should be. So this role becomes more important by the job description, by the person doing the work. So the Chief Knowledge Management Officer has got that load right there. Their job is to make sure they're in cohort with the operations strategy. This is an Army diagram that actually makes sense. So what I like about it is it's from their knowledge management doctrine. The Army's got absolutely great stuff as far as building the infrastructure of what knowledge sharing should be. What the point is I want to make is going back to the stuff in knowledge and what's important and how to get it out of somebody's head. They're saying 80% of it is in your brain. Only about 20% of the knowledge is actually recorded anywhere. Now, how many folks could be able to say, in any organization you've been, has there always been one person that's always been, even when you were in an organization for a couple years, you'd still go back to Joe or Jane because they just knew everybody. They just had a mind like a steel trap. And if you ever had a question, you went to that one person because they just knew everybody. That's the issue. If Jane or Joe get hit by a bus, where'd the knowledge go? Organizations got to relearn that all over again. Now, if time and effort would have been put into building a knowledge stream while that person was working, then the organization wouldn't have to have such a gap. So this is the definition out of Webster's. The fact or condition of knowing something with familiarity gained by experience and association. You can sit there and read a book on surgery, but you're sure not going to do surgery based on what you just learned from a book. Circumstance or condition of apprehending truth or fact through reasoning. So those are the critical things that I think in your definitional proposal to what your organization should be focused around. This makes sense to me. These things, and here again, in an organization, you look at those words we've talked about in building a knowledge hub, what does that also do? It actually builds a glossary of definitions that everybody cannot argue about because this is what it is. So as an organization, you've defined all these words, what it means to that organization, so it gets rid of a lot of, I didn't know you meant that.
So it comes down to how individuals interact with information.
With information and knowledge, yep, because everything is perspective. Everything is a perspective, and when you're dealing in the human brain pan, everything is what I think it is. So do you, and that's where we run into all the issues, and then if you do it all by email, then it just makes it much worse. Going back to the FM from the Army, this is their definition. I like this definition because it's concise and it makes sense to me, and I use this as my own definition of what knowledge management is. To me, the critical is the art of creating. This is not a cookie cutter IT solution that gets rolled out. Because you have to, as in leadership, you have to cohese with the folks in the organization. You can't just issue out your items and say, go forth and prosper. So this to me makes a lot of sense, and I wanted to share this because it absolutely supports every operational capacity, because decision making is in the definition. Whatever supports the organization's quality and speed of decision making will add to its competitiveness. If you can work and sustain and grow your own creative knowledge set by your own folks and involve them, you will become more competitive. You discovered that opportunity, you captured it, you shared it, and they applied it. This is representing a cycle, but also remember that I'm implying that it spirals. So that leads me to the new 3 R's. For some of us to know the old 3 R's, the 3 R's were reading, writing, and arithmetic. To me, reasoning, right there, being able to comprehend, be aware, understand, all those things. Not everybody's at the same level, but everybody has a capacity. And as long as you, as your organization, builds this knowledge set, you can train awareness. You can train expectation of, hey, this is your job, this is what we expect of you. We've been talking about a ground-up approach, the people doing the work. The people are part of the knowledge network, the knowledge capacity. But without the leadership, it's not going to work. So that's what's pulling the HR component, that's what's pulling the workforce component. That leads the culture. Telecommuting is working from home or working on your mobile device wherever you are. So look at these statistics. 64 million employees, half the US workforce, are able to telecommute part-time. 8 out of those 10 say they'd like to do so. I mean, who would not? Not everybody's position is able to do this. If you're a truck driver, you got to be driving the truck. From 2005 to 2012, U.S. workforce grew 3%. Same time period, members of the regular telecommuters grew 66%. So the workforce didn't grow that much, but the way work's getting done did.